Hello, my friends, and welcome. Welcome to the Steve Beaman Journey. This is October 2nd, 2025, and today we are going to talk about the shutdown of the U.S. government, which is affecting a lot of folks, but probably not you, and we're going to talk about the genesis of this. We're going to look at the debt, and we're going to look at why this is such a big deal as we close out 2025. Again, I'm Steve Beaman. Thanks for joining me today, and this is the Steve Beaman Show.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In a world of uncertainty, where business, freedom, and the future hang in the balance, one voice rises with clarity, experience, wisdom, and conviction. This is the Steve Beaman Show, the voice of the independent American.
Well, hello again, and thank you for joining me today as we talk about what is really the theater of the absurd. It's the continuing drama of the shutdown of the U.S. government. This is something that I've said before is a big nothing burger, but we're making a big deal out of it. And I want to talk about today what it is, why it is, and how it's actually coming about. But this is a situation, and the shutdown continues. We have about 60% of the U.S. government workforce furloughed today. So if you're in Washington visiting and you're trying to go to the Smithsonian or you're trying to go to any of the national parks, I'm sorry, they're going to be closed. So don't go look at the Lincoln Memorial. It's closed. I mean, in all seriousness, if you've scheduled a holiday for this time, I'm sorry for you, but you can't get into Yellowstone. You can't get into the Smithsonian or many of the parks. Passport services are suspended, so if you filed for a passport, you're going to be delayed. Small business guys, if you filed for an SBA loan, all of that's put on hold right now. But all of the major services, all of the major things government does are still in play. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, defense, interest on the debt, all of that's going to get paid. And I know what's most important to you. It absolutely is to me. The group that we don't want to have hurt through this shutdown, the politicians, our senators, congressmen, and yes, the president, are all going to sustain their payments and their pay and benefits through this shutdown period. So it doesn't hurt the political class, not that it ever does. They're exempt from the pain, so they can go about their insider trading. They can go about their inside deals and sweet deals to make themselves all rich. All the while, the 60% of federal workers who are cut out are the ones paying the price. Now, so it is truly the theater of the absurd. I don't know what else to call it. Our representatives are out acting like children. They're not serious about solving these problems. It's an embarrassment more often than not to watch people in the halls of Congress. I saw one video of a congresswoman walking through. Republicans, are you there? Are you there? Because they've all gone home because the government shut down. Well, the reality is we need serious people to deal with serious problems. At the end of the day, they're not really doing anything to fix it. But we are seeing some of the states and state representatives step up and say, well, if the federal government won't do it, I'll do it. And so I want to play you a quick video of a person who, this is a state representative from the Northeast, who's talking about their help they want to provide federal workers.
It's deeply offensive that the president is threatening to fire federal workers if we can't reach an agreement without offering any meaningful solutions here. The president continues to threaten those workers, but please know, if you're a civil servant in the state of Maryland, know that we have your back as a team. That's why we're here today, to announce all the ways that our offices can continue to deliver for you each and every day. The federal government might be shut down, but our offices are working. We will answer every phone call. We will respond to.
So as you watch that, you can see the response from the local politicians has been, we'll cover the backs of these federal workers. Now realize that in reality, what you've got is the federal workers are going to get their money. They're all furloughed, but they get back pay. So this is just grandstanding. This is not doing anything for these people. The people are going to get their back pay. And as I've said, we've discussed this before. This is the 21st shutdown I've lived through. These started under Jimmy Carter back in the 70s. They happened under Reagan. They happened under Bush 1, Clinton, Bush 2, Obama, Trump 1, Biden. I mean, they happen all the time. And at the end of the day, they're nothing but a footnote. Truly. I mean, let's take a look. Material effect on the economy. If you go back to 2018 and 19, which was thought of as a bad shutdown, the cost of that, when it started, it was estimated to come out at $11 billion. Now, that sounds like a big cost until you realize it's less than 0.04% of the total GDP. It's a blip. It's a footnote. It's not even a real number in the terms of the full GDP. And that money comes from a shutdown in and around Washington, D.C. The end result of the 2018 and 19 thing wasn't $11 billion, by the way. It was $3 billion, which is less than 1/100th of the GDP. So the fact of the matter is this shutdown is not going to be a big deal to the economy. In fact, the markets they were up nicely today. They've given some of that back, but they're holding steady. They're saying, we're not nervous about it. We don't like it, but we're not nervous about it. This thing is just done so that the people on either side of the equation can gin up the base, make people upset, and raise more money. And that's true because the minute there's a headline, your emails start lighting up, your texts light up from politicians asking you for more money. And at the end of the day, this theater is all about that. It's all about how do they raise money from their constituencies. So I would urge you to ignore them, understand that this will be nothing. It's just not going to have an economic impact. Now, I will say this one might be, possibly a little bit different. Trump has said during this shutdown, first, he's going to cut a lot of the spending, especially in the Green New Deal stuff. Okay, if he does, he does. There's not much they can do about it because Congress is not doing anything. But the bigger thing he said, and I want to talk to this because I know a lot of my fans, wrong word, but a lot of the people who watch me are Trump fans. Trump has threatened to take the civil workers, the 60% who were furloughed, and not pay them when they come back to work. Okay, his comment was, if you don't work, you don't get paid. I don't like that idea. I don't think the federal workers are the ones who caused this problem. This is done by the political class. And again, we can, talk about why it happened all over again, and we will a little bit, but it's the political class that can't get along. It's not the workers. Now, I have my issues with the federal, government and its labor force. I think it's bloated oftentimes and too big. But I don't want to hold federal workers accountable for the discontinuity of its political leadership. And I think the president's on a wrong path. I just think he's, barking up the wrong tree there. I don't think he's going to be able to go anywhere with it, and I think it's going to offend a lot of people that don't need to be offended. So I don't think it'll get legs. I think that's a bluff point that's going to happen. The markets, as I've said, clearly see nothing wrong. They like stability, and they have a very rational view, but they're looking at one side will give. Now, here's an interesting, question that you have to answer. Which side is going to give? And how do they do it? On the Republican side, you clearly have Donald Trump as president. He is the leader de facto of the Republican Party. It's crystal clear. So what he says goes. On the Democratic side, who's going to give in? Chuck Schumer? AOC? Hakeem Jeffries? They don't have leadership on the Democratic side. And I find it humorous how Democrats are trying to vie for position. This AOC came out, and I'm sure you saw the video of her saying, you can come to my office and negotiate. I'm here. My door's wide open. Nancy Pelosi just shut that down in a heartbeat and said, AOC, she's a good team player, but this isn't a serious discussion. You've got chaos on the Democratic side. And what I thought was most interesting, and some of you have heard about this, but Hillary Clinton of all the people, Hillary Clinton came out and said, I want to get back involved. She went on MSNBC and she said the following.
And the idea that you could turn the clock back and try to recreate a world that never was, dominated by, let's say it, white men of a certain persuasion, a certain religion, a certain point of view, a certain ideology, it's just doing such damage to what we should be aiming for. And we were on the path toward that. I mean, imperfectly, lots of, bumps along the way, but I agree with you, we were on the right trajectory.
Now, if she wants to lead the Republican Party or the Democratic Party with that kind of diatribe, I doubt that's going to be successful. I think there are a whole lot of average folks who look back over their lifetimes. I'm 63 years old, so I'm old enough to remember back when it really was pretty good in this country. We've been the shiny city on the hill for a long time, and I know a lot of people want to bash on that, but that's a wrong attitude. Go study your history. Realize how good we have it here. Our economy are we the wealthiest country on the planet? No. There are countries with very small populations and a lot of oil wealth that on a per capita basis are wealthier than we are. But we are the biggest, baddest economy in town, and we have been for 100 years. The fact of the matter is, if you live in the United States, you hit the jackpot, you hit the lottery ticket. It's really good here, and it has been really good here. So for Hillary to come out and say this is a world that never was, to me is a disservice to history. It's just not really what happened. So she has come out and she said, okay, the white men are the problem, but there's just no leadership there. Now, if you're a betting person, I think this is fun. You can get on Polymarket and make a bet, because in Vegas you can bet on anything. And Polymarket is betting that this shutdown lasts more than 35 days or more than 15 days. It's a 35% chance of that. And I think they have like $200,000 betting on that position. So with Trump on the one hand, no Democrat on the other, and the betting market saying this is going to be extended, it's all about who caves first. And I think it's going to be the Democrats. I really do. And I want to shift from that a little bit with you and go from there to talking about debt, because at the core of this debate ultimately is debt, right? The spending issues are always what cause these problems in Washington. Now, I would argue none of them are as serious about this as we are, because we see the potential effect on you and me. But the fact is, these people in Washington use this as a pulley to go back and forth. As of this broadcast, I want to give you some interesting data. If you go back to 1900, local, state, and federal spending accounted for about 10% of the U.S. GDP. 10%. So we're a very laissez-faire economy at that point. People were responsible for themselves. Government basically did national defense. Today, that percent has grown. Local, state, and federal spending is about 43% of the GDP. So what's interesting to me about that, we talk all the time about how we have a $27 trillion GDP. 43% of that is government. 43%. So on one hand, you say, well, that must be good. Government spending is driving up the GDP. But what that fails to understand is government spending also drives up our debt. That's why our debt has grown to the whopping $37 trillion that it is today. It's 123% of our GDP. Now, when you look at, our private GDP is like 15 trillion. Compare the debt to that. And government has weird numbers. I can tell you that the actual debt's like 10 trillion. When I say that, of the 37 trillion, about 27 trillion of it's internal debt. It's money the government borrowed from a program to pay another. They rob Peter to pay Paul, and that's typically Social Security. They go in and they borrow money out of Social Security to pay other programs. So that 10 trillion is actually owed to outsiders. That's money we owe to other governments, bondholders, and all those people. So that's real debt. And when you compare that to our actual, private sector GDP It's beginning to become very unhealthy, which is why you're seeing more and more people get upset by it. And your personal debt. So we talk about these big numbers, and it's too big to fathom for most people, right? I've been talking about this, my gosh, since 2012. And the numbers just keep getting bigger. But if you look today at yourself, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, your all-in debt is about $118,000 per person. Per person. So don't tell me that's not a drag on the economy. It must be. And so I've been, looking at whether this drag is a real thing or is it not. I've been looking a lot at FDR and his imposition of the New Deal and then the growth in it through the Great Society of Lyndon Johnson up to Trump. And I'm looking at it now because of this perspective of the shutdown that we have. When you go back to the Depression, FDR walked into a world in which we had 20% unemployment. The economy had stalled. And in Europe and the Far East, you had Nazism, fascism, and militarism. So you had these single dictatorship models that were growing and becoming stronger. He feared for the U.S. He feared for the democracy that we had. So he came in and said, we're going to, for the first time, use the federal government to provide assistance to people. He put in Social Security. That was his big program. And he basically said, we're going to transfer wealth from the young workers to the older retirees. But we're going to put it under the name of insurance. We're going to try to make it look good. So he did. So Roosevelt did a lot of things, mostly work programs and that were designed to get the country through that Great Depression. It's hard to describe it as a human if you go back to that, but picture yourself in Franklin Roosevelt's desk. He's looking at the U.S. economy collapsed. He's looking at Europe and the Far East going into militarism and fascism. He's looking and saying, can I sustain this democracy only if our economy gets back? So he has to rebuild confidence in the economy. So he puts in a bank holiday, which was successful. By the way, in that bank holiday, they put money into the banks, very similar to 2008. That's what kept the banking system whole. He then went out and he created Social Security and he created a bunch of work programs, which put people to work building infrastructure, the Hoover Dam, the Tennessee Valley Authority, major programs to help build infrastructure for the United States. Now, all that was really powerful. Now, compare it, and I'm not doing a comparison of Trump to FDR, okay? That's not what this is about. But I'm putting some equivalency to their situations in this light. Roosevelt walked in and said, if I don't fix this economy and I don't build our economy strong enough to fight the fascism and militarism that we're seeing grow around the world, we could lose everything. Literally, we could be conquered by the Germans and we could lose our nation. What Trump had coming in his mind, and you could disagree with this and argue it, but when Trump sat behind the Resolute desk, he said, I've got a country where the economy is flat, our global respect is down, our borders are open, our culture is in meltdown. We've got to change. Something's got to change. Most presidents come in and they don't really change things. They tweak at the margin. FDR changed things. Lyndon Johnson changed things. Reagan changed things. Trump came in and said, I have to change it. I need new ideas. What can we do? Well, the first thing he did is he tackled this idea of fair trade. Since the 1980s, in the free trade mindset of the United States, we have reduced tariffs on people importing to the U.S. But the foreign countries haven't always done the same thing. So the trade became free, but it certainly wasn't fair. The U.S. was running hundreds of billions of dollars in trade deficits every single year. We were allowing companies to take our manufacturing, take our ideas, our technology, even our people overseas because it was so much cheaper to produce over there and they could sell back into the U.S. with impunity. So Trump said, I'm going to address that. And how did he address it? He negotiated using a hammer of tariffs. And he said, I'm going to put massive tariffs on you unless you negotiate your tariffs down. Many of the countries have. Israel was one of the first. Ireland did. And we've seen many countries throughout the world negotiate their tariffs down so that we can equivalize the tariffs. We still haven't had it with China and completely. So what's happening is he's put these tariffs on, which are actually generating a lot of money. Even Jerome Powell said this is a $400 to $500 billion a year improvement in our finances. And that's why the deficit's coming down. But we have to understand more than just the trade balances. The world Trump inherited. I want to play a quick video for you, and I want you to put this in context of if you were the president, what would you do?
Our fiscal situation is a 350-pound, 2-pack-a-day smoker on the ICU table.
The U.S. federal budget is on an unsustainable path.
We're going to be broke really quickly unless we get serious about dealing.
What you have are serious people like Jerome Powell and Scott Bessent saying that if we don't do something with our debt, we're going to be destroyed. So Trump comes into that and he says, I got a trade deficit that's out of control. I've got a federal debt that is going to be a destroying thing to people. How do I get us out of that? What are new ideas? Help. Then he looked and said, society is melting down. We no longer value the things we used to value, of faith, family, and entrepreneurship. If you look at the core, and I did a presentation a while back, and I was saying like 20 years ago, if you polled people and said, what are your priorities in life? It was faith, family, and patriotism. Today, it's money, influence, and I forget the third. But it's completely reversed. Trump wants to see if we can get back to faith, family, and patriotism. Those are healthy things for a country. Most people would agree with that. So he goes to the U.S. military and he says, we're going to take out all the social engineering from the military. He goes to the Department of Education and says, quit taking, let's take the social engineering out of the schools. Let's get back to basics. Schools should teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. The military should prepare for war. That's what it does. And so Trump, you could argue all day long whether you think he's right or not. But the fact is he walked into a world very much like FDR did, where he saw the threat to democracy coming from within. And that's something that, I don't know. I've never been in the position he's in, but I can tell you the drive to do something would be very, very real. And so Trump did. And I think it's important that we can put ourselves to say, what would we do? How would you get trade deficits down, if not tariffs? If you don't renegotiate them, how do you do it? How do you reinstill a culture that's common in this country? Social media has really created a disparate culture. But again, when I grew up, we all watched the same evening news. We all listened to the same radio stations. Now, it's pick and choose. You watch this news, you watch that news, you watch this radio. The idea of being an adult, in many ways, has gone away. I blame parents for that. I think we've lost adulthood in our country. Now, I take that back to spiritual issues, as I've talked with you about, because in the end times it says children will rule the world, and I see children in, adults behaving like children, and I don't like to see that. But I hope we get back to basics there, where parents are parents, and they raise children to be respectful of the things that they should respect. Now, if you go back, and I want to go back to this whole thing about this shutdown versus the debt and deficits. This could only happen in Washington, by the way. Again, I've talked about this for 15 years. I find it bizarre. So what's this shutdown? What does it have to do with the budget? All right, the Democrats have, early in the spring, you recall the big, beautiful bill. In that bill, which passed as law, they stopped or slowed down the growth and increase to Medicaid. It was growing at 4 or 5%. They cut it down to 1%. Because they said we can't afford a 4 to 5% growth in Medicaid. We're going to cut it to 1%. They looked at the subsidies to the Obamacare insurance programs. If you want to call it Affordable Care Act, you can. I'm biased because it was anything but affordable to me. So they looked at the subsidies to that. They took the subsidies back to pre-COVID levels. We bumped everything. COVID disrupted everything. So we disrupted all these subsidies. So they took it back to pre-COVID levels. So Medicare, they cut back the growth rate. Obamacare, they cut back to older levels. And in the SNAP program, the food assistance program, they said if you're a viable worker, if you're physically capable of working, you need to do something. You need to work a little bit, or you need to get a volunteer job. You need to do something. You can't just suck off the American people. So those were the big changes that took place. The Democrats have come back and said, we want you to restore the growth rate in Medicare, and they're going to call it a cut. They're going to say, we want you to restore the cuts. They weren't cuts. We reduced the growth rate. We didn't cut it. Washington never cuts anything. It just reduces how fast it grows. They wanted to restore the subsidies to Obamacare to pre-COVID levels, or to the COVID levels. Well, no, they'd all agreed on these levels before COVID hit. So let's just take it back to that rational view. And third, they want to take the work requirements out of SNAP. Well, by and large, the American people don't want any of that. They say this Medicare expenditures are getting out of hand, or Medicaid, are getting out of hand. We have to control that. The Obamacare subsidies, it's not unreasonable to go back to pre-COVID levels since COVID disrupted everything. And on the SNAP program, it's not unhealthy for people to work. So all in all, the Democrats have a losing position, which is why I think they're going to give in. Now, I will tell you, and I've talked to enough people, if you're on the left, or you're in the more what they call progressive camp, even though I'm not sure that's appropriate, because progressing to what? I don't know. But if you're in that camp, and the solution is always, well, let's tax the billionaires to deal with our financial problems. That way we can give benefits to Medicaid. We can keep the subsidies to Obamacare, and we can drop the work requirements from things like SNAP. Let's tax the billionaires. If you think that's a good idea, great. Here's some numbers that you need to know. If you take the top 100 wealthiest people in the United States, okay, the top 100, and you take all of their money, 100% of it, it's about $4 trillion. That covers the federal government for about 8 months. That's it. It would certainly solve the deficit for a couple years. So we'd be balanced budget for about 2 years. But then what do? You've wiped out the wealth creators. You've taken Elon Musk and taken him to nothing. You've taken Jeff Bezos and said, you're worth nothing now. Are they going to do it again? Are new inventors and new entrepreneurs going to be motivated when they know their wealth is just going to be stripped from them? I don't think so. So what happens? The wealthy don't have enough money to help. They can contribute some, but they don't have enough to solve it. What they're going to do is they're going to come at you, the middle class, because that's where all the money is. And they're going to say to you, well, we need to raise your employment taxes. Right now you pay about 15% for Social Security and Medicare all in, right? You pay 7.5%, your company pays 7.5%, but you're paying the 15%, really? They're going to bump that up. They're going to bump up eligibility. So instead of 65, it's 72. Now, I don't think that's a bad idea. Go back to Social Security when it was started. You got it at 65, and the average lifespan was 65. It wasn't designed to be a long-term retirement program. It was an old age survivor's benefit to help the survivors of that age who lived for a year or two. Now we're talking we live to 75, 80, 90. Social Security wasn't designed to be a long-term thing. So if we say, well, for people entering this system now, we're going to bump it up to 72 or 73, I don't think that's a problem. Because I think they're going to live so much longer, they should be productive longer anyway. It's healthy. It's biblical. And we've talked about biblical economics and the fact that work is a healthy thing. So they're going to come at you. And don't think there's enough money. Again, we talk about, so you can say, well, let's raise corporate taxes. Okay. What do you think companies do when they get a tax increase? They charge you. So it's a tax on you. And so the government says, well, okay, we have to solve these deficits absent some significant structural problem. We can raise taxes, or you know what we can do? Let's just use inflation. Let's inflate prices. That's the best tax there ever was. And it's hidden from you. You don't see it as a tax. You blame the companies. Oh, look, big bad company raised prices. They raised prices because their costs went up. Who benefits from that? The government. It devalues their debt. so they don't have as much debt trouble, and it raises their income from the people so they can take more from you. So if you look again, the solution to this, to me, is to quit raising the budget so fast, cut back the growth in it, and then build the economy so it can overcome it. And I think that's doable. The other options are to raise taxes and inflate. And I don't think any of us want that. So going back to my whole genesis of this talk, when Roosevelt said, I have to do something, Trump said, I have to do something. Let's put in fair trade, and let's try to build the economy faster than the growth of government. So let's cut back the growth in government and let's build the economy. Democrats are screaming, saying you can't cut back the growth in the government. And that's the reason for the shutdown. I think at the end of the day, they're going to give on that. Now, so the bottom line is the theater of the absurd continues. These people can't help themselves. They go out to generate media and to generate money, and so they come at you and they say, "Oh my God, we're going to close the government." Won't affect you at all. But in reality, there's 60% of the federal workforce that are affected. They'll get their money at the end of the day, and they'll be fine too. So economically, again, this will be a footnote. It won't be a big thing. But look at it in the context of the overall budget. When you personally are $118,000 in debt, your child is $118,000 in debt, your grandchild is $118,000 in debt, that's not a good statistic. And there's no hope under the current structure of things for that to get better. So either you raise taxes and inflation, or you start to cut the growth in government. And that's what the administration is trying to do. The Democrats don't like it, so they go out to the theater of the absurd. As always, if you're looking to start a business, I'd love to communicate with you. You can reach me at steve@stevebeaman.com. If you want, there's a book up on Amazon I wrote called The Sales Warrior. It's a compendium of my 40 years of experience in sales. You might want to stop and pick up a copy. It'd be fun for you. I am doing some webinars for SCORE, as I've said, so I welcome you to write into SCORE and see if you can get into those. I'd love to have you there. And any way I can help, I'd love to help you. So I welcome you, as always, to write me or DM me, steve@stevebeaman.com. Thank you much. Have a blessed day, and I'll see you tomorrow.